I'm very happy to introduce our speaker, Jennifer Cramer-Miller. She's the director of the National Kidney Foundation for Minnesota, and she's come here today to talk about the greatest gift you can give, which is the gift of life. Here's Jennifer.
Hello, everybody. Like Linda just said, I'm Jennifer Cramer-Miller. I'm not the director, I should clarify, of the National Kidney Foundation. I'm the board chair of the National Kidney Foundation. But I am so happy to join you today and share my story with you. The way that this came to be was, and let me know, like raise your hand if you can't hear me, because I'm trying to talk directly into the mic and I hope you can all hear me. The way that this talk came about today was Linda reached out to the National Kidney Foundation and said that you were interested in learning about kidney donation. And as a longtime kidney patient and the board chair of the National Kidney Foundation, I have a lot of knowledge about, from the recipient side, organ donation. So I am happy to share my story with you today and provide some education and awareness. On a serendipitous side note, Nancy Albrecht is very good friends with my parents and family. So when she heard that I was speaking, she reached out to my mom and dad and asked them to join us, and they are here today, so I'm happy to see those friendly faces. And there's a lot of fun connections in this room. So I will dive in. In the last 35 years, I've been on dialysis 3 times, and I've had 4 kidney transplants. And yes, 4 is a lot. My husband, who's also here, tells me I should always leave a little pause after I say 4 kidney transplants to leave room for the audible gasps that come from the crowd. But I'm really here because I'm just so chock full of gratitude for my donors. And my first 2 transplants were from deceased donors, which is really because individuals checked a box at the DMV and said yes to organ donation. My 3rd and 4th transplants were made possible by, oops, I think we lost the PowerPoint, were made possible by my mom, Liz Cramer, and my husband, Dirk Miller, through living donation. So I'm going to tell you all about that today. Oh, if it just dies, just... Great, thank you. I'm so glad that Nadine knows what she's doing with technology. That was a great relief to me. So, for background, I grew up here in Golden Valley, and then I went to college in Washington State at the University of Puget Sound, where I got a degree in business and a minor in psychology. And I was happy, healthy, normal. I had a best friend. We moved into an apartment together after we graduated. I got a promising PR position, and I felt full of promise and ready to launch. But then one day, I woke up and I felt puffy. My eyes felt very squishy. My ankles were feeling puffy. I was tired. I didn't feel right. So I went to the doctor, thinking, maybe I had the flu or a virus, something that I could get a quick fix for, and then just move on with my life. But what happened was, the doctor told me that I had damage in my kidneys. And the reason he discovered this is because they asked me to pee in a cup, and I had protein in my urine. Protein has no place in urine. A healthy kidney will not allow protein to pass into your urine, but mine had lots of it. And he said that's a sign of kidney damage, so you're going to need to have a biopsy to determine the cause and the extent of this damage. Well, my dad, a custom home builder, had built a home for a nephrologist in the Kenwood area. His name was Dr. Brown. And so my parents really encouraged me to come home to Minneapolis and get a biopsy, which is what I needed. And biopsy was a really scary word for me at 22 years old. It's still a scary word, but I just thought it meant cancer. I didn't have any idea what it meant. So I came home, we saw Dr. Brown, and I got the biopsy. And what I found out after that is I heard 2 words that I didn't want to hear: incurable and progressive. I had a kidney disease out of the blue, an autoimmune kidney disease, and it's called focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. A lot of syllables in that, so FSGS for short. But when I first heard all those syllables, I had no idea what was ahead. And what was ahead was a giant dose of prednisone, which I'm going to guess some of you are familiar with prednisone because it's kind of a wonder drug. They use it for many things, but it's also, I think, kind of a nasty beast, especially in high doses. I had a lot of side effects from prednisone. There were also discussions about my quality of life. And at 22, I can assure you, I had never considered the quality of my life. I just assumed I was going to have a good life. I thought that's just how it went. But within 6 months, prednisone did not work and I had kidney failure. So it was devastating. It really was. I felt like I had been ripped from my rightful place in the world. But my mom, thank goodness, was there with me every step of the way. She accompanied me to so many doctor's appointments, and she did it so cheerfully. Like I would say, Mom, I have to get my labs checked tomorrow, do you want to come? And she'd always say, I'd love to, what a riot. So she had a great way to keep our spirits up through bad times. But when I was on dialysis, I had to go 3 times a week. And at that point, DaVita clinics weren't on every corner. This was in 1987. So dialysis was in hospitals. And I would go to Abbott Northwestern Hospital 3 times a week for about 3 hours a time to get my blood cleaned. That's what dialysis is. When your kidneys fail, the only way to survive is either be on dialysis or get a kidney transplant. So I was on dialysis, and this is what that was like. I would wake up in the morning, and I would typically be very nauseous and throw up. I would trudge through a shower, getting dressed. I was anemic, was low on energy, and I had to count my fluid ounces very carefully because my kidneys had failed, so I had no urine output. Everything I drank would stick with me until I would go to dialysis and have it removed. I was so very, very thirsty. I will never forget being that thirsty. And the way that I try to explain it is I don't know if any of you have ever been very dehydrated or had way too much sodium and you get really thirsty, or maybe even had a hangover, who knows. When you get so thirsty you just want to drink water all the time. That's what it felt like all the time, but I couldn't drink the water. So that was hard. They told me I should chew sour gum, suck on lemons, and do various things like that that weren't that great. Also, I had to be very compliant with my diet because kidneys do a lot more than just, filter fluid out of your blood. They clean your blood. Things like potassium is eliminated in your urine. So if you don't have a urine output, your potassium can build up, and that can be fatal. It can cause fatal heart rhythms. So they didn't want me to mess around with potassium. And potassium is in all the good stuff, like potatoes and tomatoes and avocados and all sorts of things. I also had to be very careful with my sodium, my phosphorus, which is in a lot of dairy products. And if you have kidney failure and your phosphorus gets too high, that can pull the calcium out of your bones and cause weak bones. So there's a lot of stuff to try to track. I also had to watch my cholesterol and my protein. So I was leading a much different life than my now 23-year-old friends in Seattle. But eventually, I found surprising camaraderie with my fellow kidney patients at Abbott Hospital. They were mostly in their 70s and 80s, and like I said, I was 23. But we really bonded. Also with the nurses and technicians. I kind of refer to it as a medical version of Cheers. It was a place where I would go and everybody knew your name. But I don't want to oversell it. It was not a blast. I lost a lot of things. I lost weight, I lost my hair, and I lost my sense of self. Then Dr. Brown discussed a kidney transplant. And we briefly talked about living donation at that point. He asked, my mom about the blood type of my family members. And my mom and I were compatible blood types. We were A negative. But they quickly determined that my mom and I did not have enough matching antigens, and she wasn't a compatible donor for me. So we just breezed right through that. That wasn't going to work, and I was on the transplant list. It seemed like it was never going to happen. And the wait was going to be long. Dr. Brown warned me about that. So I'm going to just give you a little bit of statistics about how this system works. Today there's about approximately 100,000 people that are in the US waiting for a kidney transplant. And last year, 2022, just over 25,000 people got kidney transplants. Well, that was a record year. That was very celebrated, that we got to this point where just over 25,000 people were able to get kidney transplants. But you can see there's a big discrepancy between the celebrated 25,000 and the 100,000 people waiting. That's why the wait is long. There's just a shortage of available kidneys. So the average wait is about 3 to 5 years, and that's a long time to be on dialysis. It's a hard life on dialysis. Every 10 minutes, another person is added to the transplant waiting list, and 17 people die each day while they're waiting. So that ends up being about a little over 6,200 people. And I don't know if you think that sounds like a lot or not a lot, but I did hear a very interesting TED Talk from a transplant surgeon. I have to look up his name, I don't recall, but he equated the number of people dying every year to, if you took that number and put those people on a 747 that crashed with no survivors. That would be 12 747s that crash every year. And his point was, what if that was the case? All these 747s were crashing, but we knew if we got more people to take 30 seconds to sign up to be an organ donor or check a box at the DMV, that we could prevent those crashes. And I thought that was a really interesting way to phrase it. So organ donation really helps, and it's something that we find in Minnesota. About 60% of people are registered organ donors, but about 95% of people say that they believe in organ donation. So sometimes there's an action gap that at Donate Life and the National Kidney Foundation, we're working to close that gap. But I was waiting and I was waiting, and it took 1 year and 8 months. And then it happened. I got a call from a doctor at the University of Minnesota Medical Center. And I'll never forget that call, because he said, yeah, we've got a good kidney for you if you think you're able to come in and get it. And the way he said it was like I might have something better to do, so he just wondered if I could make it in. But of course, I said, yes, I can come in and get it. So I did. I went in to the hospital and I received that kidney. And it was so wonderful. I was able to drink these fluids, and they had potassium things on my tray. And 3 days later, it was not wonderful, because 3 days later, I found out that my FSGS had recurred. And I didn't even know that was a possibility. I thought I was going to get this transplant, and it was just going to be the train ride back to my future. I thought I would just go back to Seattle, pick up where I left off, and all would be well. But that train wasn't going to leave the station. So now, I've learned since, it happens in about 30% of FSGS cases. And I wondered, how am I ever going to have a meaningful life? You know, I wanted what all my peers wanted. I dreamed of having a career and, you know, an ambitious career, and meeting a rom-com worthy soulmate, and then having babies and displaying them on glossy annual holiday cards. I wanted all the things that my friends wanted, and that didn't look like that was going to be the case. But Dr. Brown said we would manage the FSGS with medications and, you know, hope that it would last a certain amount of time. But he told me something I've always remembered, which was very helpful expectation management. Transplants are a vacation from dialysis. Because like I said, when you have kidney failure, those are your only two options to stay alive. You're either on dialysis or you have a transplant. And he made me realize that I really had to appreciate every day that I had with my transplant vacation. So it kind of felt like I was Cinderella at the ball. I just didn't know when the stroke of midnight was going to come. But I plowed along after that transplant, and I didn't have any signs of rejection, which was very good, and things were better. I wasn't on dialysis, my food and fluid restrictions were lessened, and I realized I had a really significant decision to make. I could either choose hope or despair. You know, I had a lot to accept with this incurable progressive kidney disease, and I just chose hope. I thought hope seemed like more fun than despair. So my new goal was to make my life the best that I could with the circumstances that I had. And I strive to live by this quote that I really like from Joseph Campbell. We must be willing to give up the life we've planned so that we can live the life that is waiting for us. So I set out to relish my transplant vacation. But the other thing that was top of my mind, and I was 25 years old at this point, was that organ donation is really at the intersection of life and death, and that was confusing for me. I knew that for me to be happy about getting this kidney matched up with another family's sorrow and grief. And that was hard to wrestle with. But in the years since, I now am an ambassador for Donate Life. And I know that the families who are donor families take a lot of comfort in knowing that in their time of tragedy, that their loved one made a decision to have their life go on in somebody else. So I felt that I owed it to my donor's family to make my life the best that I could, because I got a gift that allowed me to make wonderful memories, and it was all through the power of yes. So memories, here I come. I set off to make them, and my dad hired me to work at his custom home building firm so I could use my business and public relations skills. And there was a little bit of nepotism, but I'm grateful for it, so thank you so much, Dad. I also wrote freelance articles for a local home magazine, and I started dating, and I reclaimed a social life. And then I went to graduate school, and I got my MBA at St. Thomas. And then I met a guy who became my boyfriend, and then he became my husband. His name is Dirk, and he's sitting right there in the front row. And he's pretty noteworthy in this story because he's going to show up again at the very end. But I achieved a lot of wonderful things during my first transplant, just from the generosity of my donors, yes. But as expected, that first transplant did not last forever. It lasted 5 years and 3 months. And a year after Dirk and I were married, I was back on dialysis for the second time. That was a very short wait, however. I was only on dialysis this time at Methodist Hospital for 5 short months. And then I got that call again. And my second transplant was also due to somebody, an individual who checked a box at the DMV and said yes. This time, I did not have that immediate hit of proteinuria after I got this kidney, like I did the first time. And they had put me on some different medications before I got the kidney, and I think that lessened that hit of proteinuria from the first time, protein in my urine from the FSGS. So we knew I still had FSGS, but it was going a lot better. It was being managed better. And I got another gift of life and of time and of the luxury of making memories after my second transplant. So then I became the vice president of sales and marketing for the company. I was happily married to my husband, and the biggest deal of all is I got pregnant. And that was a real miracle. I got pregnant a little ahead of schedule. You weren't supposed to get pregnant till a year after transplant, but I have to admit I wasn't really paying much attention. I didn't ever get my period after my transplant, that second transplant, so I just didn't think anything was really possible. And sure enough, I got pregnant after 7 months. And now I know more about how rare that is. Like, there's a very short window of fertility that can happen in women who've had kidney disease. And I just managed to hit that window at exactly the right time, and it was pretty darn exciting. I was so happy to be pregnant. I would drive around in my car just glowing that I was pregnant. Felt like I was such a normal person. I had all these normal things happening. So my pregnancy went well until I had some complications at 28 weeks. The baby was pushing on my ureter, which is the tube that connects the kidney to the bladder. It caused a kink. Then I had a premature rupture in my membrane and had to go on bed rest. And at 33 weeks, our daughter was born premature. She was just over 4 pounds. But she was the healthiest little bundle of 4 pounds. I just looked at her and thought, she looks so good. But she did have to stay in the NICU for 5 weeks. The problem was I developed a septic infection. And sepsis, you don't want to mess around with sepsis. I don't recommend it. It was pretty bad. So I had to go to the ICU. I was at Hennepin County. No, I was at Abbott. And our daughter was at NICU at Hennepin County. This was a real low point, especially for my husband. He was traveling back and forth between the NICU and the ICU, hoping he wasn't going to have to raise our little baby daughter by himself. But good news, I recovered, Liza grew, she got out of NICU, we all went home, and Dirk made an announcement. He said we were so lucky to have one healthy baby, and that was enough for him. He didn't ever want to go through that experience again. He went and got a vasectomy, and snip, our family of 3 was complete. But 3 is a family. And the gift of life from my second deceased donor not only gave me more life, it gave me the ability to create life. So life after donation goes on and on. And by the time Liza was 5, my kidney function had declined. My doctor recommended I look into another transplant, but he recommended a living donor this time. There had been a lot more talk about living donation in these years, because now we're up to about 2002. And they decided to check my mom again, because the level of matching antigens required for successful transplants, that criteria had changed. And they found that she was a suitable donor for me. Well, I didn't know how I felt about that, because I thought she had done quite enough for me already. But she was pretty darn insistent. And, you know, true to style, she said, come on, a couple surgeries, it'll be a riot. So, I got my 3rd transplant from my mom. 2 surgeries were performed successfully, and we both recovered, and she gave me yet another vacation from dialysis. So if we go back to the shortage that I talked about, where we have 100,000 people waiting, 25,000 people get a transplant, you can see how living donation really helps the numbers. Living donation has been found to be very safe, and the University of Minnesota has done quite a bit of studies on the life expectancy of people who donate actually can exceed a normal life expectancy. And the reason is they're so vetted. Living donors are among the healthiest people there are. So it's safe, and it's a really wonderful contribution to help bridge this gap. But as the National Kidney Foundation, we've worked really hard on protecting living donors. And it's so exciting that we've been working on a Living Donor Protection Act. And last summer, we actually were successful, and Governor Walz signed into law the Living Donor Protection Act in Minnesota, which prohibits insurance discrimination against living donors in life and disability insurance. And the reason is because I just said there is no statistics that show that there's a greater risk for longevity for living donors. So insurance discrimination didn't make any sense. And actually the insurance industry really did support the bill as well. So that was a big victory. Now the National Kidney Foundation, we're working on making this a federal law. I think there's about 22 states that have adopted it now. But so I set out to make more memories after my mom donated her kidneys so generously. And I enjoyed going back to Seattle. I had reunions with my friends. We were all turned 40. I could volunteer at Liza's school. I worked with really interesting clients with my dad. My husband and I could travel. And I had energy for spunky little slumber parties that my daughter had with all her friends over. And depending on your perspective, this might sound like mundane things, but my perspective is mundane things can be pretty miraculous. So here's another quote that I really like. There are only two ways to live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle. The other is as though everything is a miracle. And I see a lot of miracles in my life. So, as it always does, after several years, almost 8, my kidney from my mom ran its course. And I was pretty sad about that. My mom was very even keel about it. She said, we knew it would happen, you got all these great years. But I was back on dialysis. And this time, I did home hemodialysis. And there's been a big push to get people to do home dialysis if it's a viable option for them. If you have space, if you have the cognitive skills to be able to learn the machine, it can be a great option, and it was a great option for me. Meanwhile, 15 family and friends tested to see if they could be my donor, including my husband Dirk, and nobody was a compatible match. But Dirk doesn't give up easily, so he said he was determined to find a way, and he did find a way. He looked into the paired exchange program. And what this is it's like a kidney swap. So let's say I'm the red dress person up there, and Dirk is in the yellow shirt. It says heroic Dirk on there. I don't think you can see that, but I put that on there for fun. So we're not compatible. But then down on the right corner, there's that kind of blue shirted person. And that person is an altruistic donor. That kidney went to me, and Dirk's kidney went to the man in the orange shirt. So I just can't even explain to you what a giant step forward paired exchange is for transplantation, and how amazing. Like, there was so much goodness that was happening. I mean, first of all, my husband very willingly offered to donate his kidney, like my mom had done years earlier. Kind of like he was signing up to go to the dentist. He acted like it wasn't that big of a deal. I don't know what you call a guy like that, but I call him my hero. And then next, this altruistic donor, out of the goodness of his heart, just decided to give someone his kidney. He wasn't directing it to anybody. And here's the real kicker. He was 25 years old at the time. And my transplant coordinator called and said, yeah, there's this 25-year-old donor. He really wants to donate, and he's been thinking about it a long time, and he wants to do it soon. And I was like, he's 25 years old. How long could he have been thinking about this? It just blew me away, the whole thing. So Dirk and I recovered together. We would hold pillows over our incisions and try not to make each other laugh, because it hurt. But Dirk was pretty proud of himself, I must say. About a week later, we went to an event at Breck School, where my daughter was a student at the time. And I would look over and I would see Dirk lifting up his shirt, showing people his laparoscopic scar. And I was not going to exhibit my scar to people, but good for Dirk. He was very proud, and I was really proud of him. So I had more time again, to make more memories, and transplant number 4 was again from the power of yes. One thing I want to point out is you might have heard about kidney chains, and paired exchange donation can set off amazing kidney chains. Our case was 4 surgeries, but there have been the longest chain, actually started by a donor at the University of Minnesota, set off 70 surgeries and saved 35 lives, 35 people. got kidney transplants because of one altruistic donor or non-directed donor at the University of Minnesota. So it's so amazing how far an act of kindness can go. But Dirk and I were able to do some great things with that kidney. We've traveled places. We spent holidays in Pennsylvania with Dirk's family. We saw our daughter off to college. And, you know, I got to move her into her dorm room. Things that seem, once again, mundane, but they weren't mundane to me. And I just really have been able to enjoy more extraordinary, ordinary life. So I've seen so much from organ donation and what it's done for me, and people who improve other people's lives. It's amazing. So I think the least I can do is spread the word and give back. And that's what's led me to my work with the National Kidney Foundation. I'm also an NKF, which is National Kidney Foundation, an NKF peer mentor. So I talk to other patients and help them go through their transitions. Like I said, I'm a Donate Life ambassador. And I'm also an author. And I'm very excited because I have a book coming out in just over 2 weeks. And it's called Incurable Optimist, Living with Illness and Chronic Hope. And I'm just pretty glad that I was able to be here and to write the book and have all the life that I've been able to have. So the memories matter to me. It's been a whole lot of wonderful. And you know, a little plug for optimism, it seems to go a long way. It's really helped me. So just remember, optimists have more fun. But I want to wrap it up on behalf of myself and the National Kidney Foundation. I just really want to thank you for caring about kidney donation and asking me to come today on behalf of the National Kidney Foundation and expressing your interest. And I want to thank you so much for your commitment to the community and the partnerships that you make with worthwhile causes. I think that this is a great organization, and I love this room. It's such a pretty room, and this is such a pretty building, so I'm just really happy to be here today. And you know, it's from the power of yes. It's from donors that I'm here. So thank you, Mom. Thank you, Dirk, for your generous benevolence. And I think I started off by saying I'm happy to be here, but now that you've heard my story, I think you know that I really mean it when I say I'm happy to be here. So thank you so much. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. And I haven't looked at the time, so let's see. Oh, I did pretty good for time. Yes, so thank you so much, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. The National Kidney Foundation does not have commercials on television, but Donate Life does. And Donate Life has a pretty good campaign. They have a lot of billboards and they have television commercials where they show people who have actually received transplants leading normal, happy lives. And so they do a good job with that. Sure. Yes?
I've had Donate on my driver's license for, gosh, I don't even know how long. I mean, a very long time. But now, I'm approaching 80. So I'm thinking, who in the world would want an 80-year-old body part?
I'm so glad that you said that. That's a great question, because Donate Life says people shouldn't self-select. That I think the oldest donation that's been made from a body, and it probably wasn't a kidney, but there are a lot of things. When you sign up to be a donor, there's a lot of things that they can use. Corneas and skin and ligaments and tendons, all sorts of things. So like, I think someone in their 90s was able to donate something to somebody. So they really encourage people, don't try to figure that out yourself. If you believe in organ donation, it's good to be a donor. And thank you for being one. Yes?
I also have checked the box on my card, and I'm wondering what kind of research does your organization do to find out why people don't want to donate?
Well, you know, the research has showed that It's not a pleasant topic, and some people shy away from it. We call it the ick factor. So some people, when they hear about organ donation, that doesn't sound very good. Like, they're just like, I don't want to listen to that. So there's some things that people are trying to do to kind of remove the ick factor from it. Like, there are some campaigns, New York has one called Recycle Yourself, because everyone is into recycling, and so there's trying to think of different ways to phrase it. But I think that's one of the problems. I've done talks to high schools, and high schools are not the most attentive audience. They kind of have to listen to it for driver's ed. They have a requirement. They need to learn about it. But I had a girl in the front row once who said, I'm not going to give anybody any of my organs, that's gross. And it's that reaction, that sort of icky reaction that I think some marketing or positioning has to kind of get around. Yes, Linda?
If someone donates a kidney, for example, does their insurance automatically cover that?
It is the recipient's insurance. So my insurance covered Dirk and my mom's donation. So the costs are not, they don't get filtered to the donor. Yes?
Is there an age limit as far as when you can receive, how long you can continue to have your transplants? Or for anybody, or is it different for different organs?
Yeah, it's different for different organs and different people's health status. I think, a nurse just told me that an 80-year-old was looking to get a bone marrow transplant. And she said that she was surprised at 80 that she wanted to undergo that, but she was very healthy and her doctors thought that it would be something that she could do. So I know my uncle, my mom's brother, my Uncle John, had kidney disease, and he lived till just like a tick under his 96th birthday. And his wife wanted him to get a transplant late in his life. She was willing to give her kidney, but in his case, they said it's probably not a surgery that you should undergo. So I know that there's been 78-year-olds who have gotten kidneys recently, so it's really, I think, a decision that the doctors look at in the health of the person. Yes?
Can you talk about the disparities in who gets kidneys and what's being done by the National Kidney Foundation to reach out to other cultures and races?
Yes, there is a lot of health disparities in medicine, we know, and it's also the case in kidney health. And it's something that is really a problem that the National Kidney Foundation is focusing on, because African Americans and Black individuals have 4 times the rate of kidney disease. And Hispanic populations have about 2 times the rate. American Indians have a higher rate of kidney disease. The 2 most common causes of kidney disease are diabetes and high blood pressure. And any population that has more of those things, they're going to have more kidney disease. So there has been some systemic things kind of built into the system that has not worked well for Black and African Americans, and that's been recognized lately and changed. And what I'm talking about is when you get your kidney labs checked, I was always puzzled about this for years, and Nancy, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. You see your creatinine and your GFR, those are kind of measures of your kidney function. And your GFR is a calculation on a couple of things. But on my lab reports, it would always say my GFR. But if you are not Caucasian, your GFR was a different number, it was higher. And you need to be under a certain GFR level to receive a kidney or be eligible for a kidney transplant. And so Black and African Americans they could have the same lab values, but there would be a racial flag that would say that they didn't need a kidney as soon. And they found that that was based on some science that wasn't accurate. And they've changed that calculation. And now they can get a transplant at the same time with someone else with the same labs. So there's a lot of embedded things that they're working on to help the health disparities, and it's a big issue.
Thank you.
Yes.
Have you participated in genetic testing to determine whether or not your daughter is at risk for the same disease?
No, because it's not a genetic disease. So they said, I mean, it's a real dumb disease. It's just out of the blue. Like, a lucky few of us get this disease and they don't know why, but it's not genetic. So they haven't recommended any testing like that. Yes?
Do you have to die in a hospital in order to give your, I'm a donor.
Yes.
How soon after you die? I mean, kidneys still last for long, right?
Yeah, this is such a good question because there is if you register as a donor death has to be a very specific death to make that person eligible to donate their organs. And you do have to die in a hospital. You have to be like what they call brain dead and on life support. And so these criteria aren't always matched by everybody who's a donor. So it's not everybody who checks the box that can actually have their organs used for that. It's a pretty specific set of circumstances. But they are doing things now where, like I just read this in the Star Tribune recently, the University of Minnesota is working on a system where they can freeze organs and preserve them longer so that it's not such a quick window. Because a lot of organs are not viable after a certain period of time. So that's a big advancement that's coming, and there's a lot of advancements coming. It's kind of an exciting time for kidney health because there's a company right here in Eden Prairie called Matrix, and they're doing research on bioengineered kidneys. They're actually using pig kidneys from the food supply, and they're able to strip all the cells out to create a scaffold that they're eventually going to be able to take human cells and make human cells populate this scaffold, and then they're going to be able to have, reduce that shortage. So there's quite a few exciting things going on. Yes?
Are those human cells potentially from the people who would receive the organ?
That's their phase 2, and that to me is the most exciting part. Phase 1, they would receive cells from donors and then create the organ that way. But phase 2 is what I'm super excited about because when they can take the cells of someone like me and populate that on this scaffold of kidney, then there won't be the need for immunosuppressant medication, which is a big part of having a transplant, and there's side effects to those medications and it's hard on the body. So to eliminate that would be a huge, huge change.
Why don't you give Nancy first?
It's a little confusing addressing Deb's question and the disparity in medicine, how that is, some of it maybe is still going on today.
Yes.
So as a Caucasian, my blood, everything that has to be in place to be accepted could not go to a black person or an American Indian or...
No,
is that right?
It could, but the closer, like if you're a Hispanic person, it's better if you can get a kidney from somebody in your genetic kind of range, but they don't limit the transplants that way. But in the world of trying to get people to be registered organ donors, there's a lot of work in the Hispanic community and different people that might have a kind of ick factor reaction or a cultural reaction. And Native Americans have had sort of a cultural reaction. There's been a lot of work in those communities because I know a woman who, they lost a little boy to a disease, and then this Native American tribe really pushed to spread the word about donation. And so there's cultural shifting in their views on different areas. But yeah, they would like to increase the supply from different cultural backgrounds.
Compound complex.
Yes. Yeah, it's a lot. Yes?
You can live with one kidney, correct?
Yes, which is kind of an odd system that we're born that way, but we're all born with 2 kidneys. and you can live very well with one. So it's like we have an extra. And you know, I can say my mom, I guess I don't know if you want me to say your age, but I don't think you care about that. So my mom is 86, so 21 years ago is when she donated her kidney. And recently she had some lab work and I looked at her kidney function numbers. It's perfect. Her kidney function is so perfect. And usually when you're 86, your creatinine, which is your measure of your kidney function, goes up a little bit just naturally with aging. Hers is really good. It's really low. So yeah, that makes me happy. Yes?
I was told that my other kidney was just not functioning, but it's still there. I never had it removed.
Oh, yeah, some people are actually born with one kidney. But yeah, if you are born with two and one doesn't work, then you're an example. You can't give one away though. Don't give one away.
I don't think anybody would want
Yes. But you're a good example how you can live with one kidney. Yes?
So why can't you live with just one kidney?
Well, I do have one kidney transplant, so I'm...
No, but you have another kidney.
Oh, when you get a kidney disease that affects both kidneys. So the focal sclerosis or FSGS shut down both of my kidneys. Yeah. Well, here's a copy of my cute cover of my book. And I'm excited about it. I told my husband I wore like blue shoes today to kind of match the cover of my book. I thought that would be good luck. But it's available so soon. And at the back of the room, I did leave some cards from the National Kidney Foundation, so you can get some more information there. And I left some cute little bookmarks, so feel free to take a bookmark. And if anyone isn't interested in the book, it's available at Bookshop, Amazon, Target, Barnes & Noble. It'll be, if anyone orders it, it'll be sent within 2.5 weeks. So it's very exciting, and I really wrote it because I have so much experience, and I do talks, and I talk to NKF mentees one-on-one, and I just wanted a vehicle that I could spread the word more broadly. So I'm so happy to have been here today, and thank you all so much.